bits of paper Lauren is now distributing, which I would like members to read as and when. I'll let you know. Welcome to a new member of our committee, Matthew Taylor. Welcome, Matthew. I hope you enjoy this. And Lauren, if we could have the, well, I'll leave you for a minute. Could I just say, if you've got mobile phones, please turn them off. And also that to my left are two members of the Democratic Services who will be dealing with our minutes and with the wherefore with the technology. I can never think of the right word to say for that. And on my, we also have the Deputy Directors, Philip Browson. Morning, Philip.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Good morning, members of the public. I'm the Assistant Director, Chairman. I know my moniker changes on a daily basis, but I'm today the Assistant Director of Planning. Thank you.
Okay, I have got it down here, but I can never remember the name of it. And to my right, we have Noel Doran.
Morning, everybody. My name is Noel Doran. I'm a solicitor, legal advisor to the Development Committee this morning.
If you do need the facilities, they are outside. Go out the door, turn left, and you will find an open door at the end. And if this goes on long enough, we will stop for 15 minutes for a comfort break and coffee break. And I also have on the screen at the moment Officer Reuben, who will be presenting both the applications today. Now, over to Lauren. Apologies for absence, please, Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Nigel Lloyd and from Councillor Liz Withington.
And the substitutes?
We've got substitutes, Councillor Adams for Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Rest for Councillor Withington.
Right, if we could go to the minutes, I will just take you through these because it was a rather complicated meeting last time. So if you'd like to turn to page 1, just shout out if there are any problems with these.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Just one issue. I'm not down as being present at the previous meeting.
Right, note that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor, that's okay now. Yeah. Page 2, page 3. Page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15. Thank you. Can I have a proposer to accept the minutes, please? Councillor Kershaw, seconder. Councillor Fitztillett, thank you. Any items of urgent business?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Order of business will be as it stands. So we will start with East Ruston and then on to the Dormy Hotel. Declarations of interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, any? I have a declaration that's on East Ruston in that the sister of the manageress of the pub that we're going to discuss works at Stalham Post Office. I live in Stalham and I do know her, but there has been no discussion whatsoever regarding this application. Anybody else? Thank you. Right, we now swiftly go over to the first application, East Ruston PF/21/2469, and I pass you to Officer Colin Reuben, who will be presenting. This is on page 15, is it? 19. 19.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is item 8 on the agenda, which is application reference PF 212469. The application proposes the erection of 7 single-storey holiday lodges in connection with the public house, associated car parking and amenity areas at the Butcher's Arms, East Ruston. The report can be found on pages 19 to 26 of the report pack.
Colin, can you just move your microphone slightly nearer to your mouth?
There we go. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
We deaf people.
The site comprises of a grassed area of enclosed land known as the Bowling Green, associated with the public house, which has been used historically for community events associated with the public house, and as a beer garden. The new units, which are not fully self-contained, are intended to provide a source of revenue to be directed towards refurbishment of the public house and are akin to small hotel rooms, therefore dependent on the public house for main meals. Associated on-site parking, including cycle parking, would be provided, along with the replacement boundary treatments and additional planting, with a beer garden retained to the rear of the pub. The principle of development is accepted under policy EC3 as an extension to an existing business, further noting the aim of securing a community facility under policies CT3 and is encouraged by the NPPF. A previous application was submitted under reference 191816, which did propose 9 units on the same site. That application was refused with concerns regarding overdevelopment, a septic tank drainage connection, and amenity in respect of potential noise impacts arising from the use of external areas of the proposed units. The current application has sought to address these concerns. It is noted that questions have been raised by objectors in regards to the stated lack of investment into the public house itself. However, officers must simply assess the application before it in respect of compliance with relevant policies within the development plan, rather than assessing the historic investment or alleged lack of such investment into the public house. The units as proposed would serve to support the existing public house, revenue from which it is stated would be channeled into future funding refurbishment to ensure its ongoing survival. The public house and application site have been designated as an asset of community value, or ACV. However, it is up to the determining authority to decide how much weight is apportioned to this matter. It is recognised that historically the land would have been used as a community asset for private and community events. However, the land is in the private ownership of the public house. Although the proposed development would result in a partial loss of an ACV, the revenue from the development would contribute towards the ongoing survival of the other half of the ACV, i.e. the pub. Further economic benefits include potential job creation, tourism and benefits to the local community in respect of securing the future of the public house. Finally, it's also recognised in terms of the sustainability credentials of what is proposed, including electric vehicle charging points, solar panels, air source heat pumps, cycle parking, low energy light fittings and enhanced insulation and thermal glass. In respect of design, previous concerns regarding overdevelopment have largely been addressed, with the reduction in the number of units from 9 to 7, with retention of more green space within the site. The design of the units is considered to be acceptable. No objections have been raised by the Highway Authority in respect of parking and access, with 1 space provided per unit. Concerns have been raised by objectors in respect of ongoing on-street parking on the road and adjacent cul-de-sac. However, this is a matter regarding the previous use of the public house, not a matter that can necessarily be solved under the current application, which, as mentioned, does provide adequate parking for each new unit, along with cycle parking and vehicle charging points. In respect of drainage, the proposed development would connect to the mains drainage system rather than the existing public house septic tank as previously proposed. Surface water would be directed to a soakaway system leading towards the proposed parking area to the north of the site, as recommended in a submitted professional drainage report. This appears to be an acceptable arrangement, and along with the reduction in the number of units from previously proposed and use of permeable paving to the rear of the units and a potential for additional planting within the site, it is considered enough to address concerns regarding runoff. Perhaps the main point of contention has been the impact of the proposed development upon amenity. This is a matter that has not been taken lightly by officers, and it is well recognised that residents have raised legitimate and well-articulated concerns regarding the potential impact of the proposed development in respect of noise, light intrusion and privacy. Regarding privacy, the units are single-storey, with the site to be enclosed by fencing and additional planting. As such, it is not considered that the proposed units would result in any significantly detrimental impact in respect of overlooking. Regarding lighting, it is agreed that lighting has the potential to be excessive if not adequately controlled. In the interests of neighbouring residents and protected species, it is suggested that controls are placed upon the addition of any external lighting. Regarding noise, it is again recognised that there are a number of residential properties around the perimeter of the site, which, although separated by a private cul-de-sac, nonetheless have the potential to be affected. To address this, the application was accompanied by a professional noise assessment, which concluded that the impact of the proposed development would be acceptable in respect of noise levels, and this did take into account conversational noise from occupants of the units and took a worst case scenario of assuming 7 people in the garden of a unit rather than the more likely number of 2. The Council's Environmental Protection Officer has been consulted on this and has not raised any objections to the proposal. It is further noted that land has previously been used as a beer garden, which in itself could have generated noise into the evening by a large number of people. Notwithstanding this, there is a level of concern remaining with planners, not to the level that would warrant refusal, but which instead would warrant strict measures on use of the units in respect of their outdoor spaces. It is therefore suggested that use of external areas is restricted and not used after 10 p.m. and not before a reasonable time in the morning to be agreed. The Environmental Protection Officer has asked for a noise control scheme to be conditioned and approved. Furthermore, the installation of acoustic fencing would be required to help further reduce any noise level when in use, along with enhanced tree planting to be secured through a landscaping scheme. In addition, since the last application, the applicant has also agreed to remove proposed external decking and jacuzzis to further limit any potential for noise. It is also noted that the units are very small, with only 1 bed and thus only likely to be suitable for individuals and couples and not families. Further consideration can also be given towards whether their use can indeed be restricted to couples only and not block booked for groups, but advice would need to be sought as to whether this would be a reasonable enforceable condition. It is hoped that these measures as outlined, along with restriction of external lighting, would to some extent allay local concerns, though it is appreciated not fully. It is also suggested that the units are strictly tied to the use of the public house, again through suitably worded conditions, to prevent their selling off separately into private ownership and to stop the site being used as a holiday site which is independent of the public house, both in terms of protecting amenity and to ensure that revenue is indeed tied towards the public house itself. So overall, to conclude, the officer recommendation is one of conditional approval for the reasons stated on pages 25 and 26 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Just one moment, please, everyone. Have you got those 2? Have you got nothing for me? You have 2 written statements here, and I'm going to have a small pause now so that members of the committee can read them. I'd just like to point out these were instead of personal representation, because the parish council member who's speaking and the objector did not get their application to speak in time. We do have a strict policy that applications to speak at these committees should be in by 9 a.m. on the Tuesday prior to the meeting. Now, for whatever reasons, it could be the IT system goes down or people are ill or whatever. Because this is important, we're looking at people's livelihoods and their houses, properties, etc. Obviously, we are human beings, mistakes are made. So we have allowed the written statements from the two representatives instead of being able to speak. So I'll now give you 2 or 3 minutes, 3 minutes or so for you to read the supporting and town council statements. Thank you. Members, have you all read the statements? You're all clear for us to carry on with the meeting now. Okay. So that has dealt with the town and the parish council statement. The objector's Mr. Brock, his statement. We now go to supporting statements from Mr. Dixon. Are you here? Would you like to come up, please? Mr. Dixon is the agent for the development. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Dixon, from the time you start. Just sit on the end there, please. And it's the second little button in here on where you speak. It looks like a little man. Second one in. Okay, well, no, I'll do it for you if you can't do it. When you've finished, we will time you from the moment you start, and then after the 3 minutes, the famous kitchen alarm will go off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Should we start now?
Yes, you can start when you
Thank
like.
you. Thank you, Chair Lady, for the opportunity to speak firsthand on behalf of my clients, Bolton Broad Properties Limited. We are pleased to note that the approval is recommended as the scheme complies with all relevant local and national planning policies. The scheme has evolved, taking seriously the previous refusal, and through pre and post application discussions with Mr. Rubens throughout the planning process. It's noted that the application has been referred to the committee as it has been called in on the basis of loss of open space and perceived noise. With regard to open space, the scheme retains a beer garden for the use of the pub customers. Furthermore, it should be noted that any public accessible open space will be lost completely without the proposed development, as acknowledged by the Council's own economic development team in the report and highlighted as such in the appraisal. Thus, the development will ensure that the longevity of the pub and amenity space is retained. Whilst objections have been raised concerning the loss of an area used for local public events, again, the reality of the situation is that no such events have taken place for in excess of 5 years, even when COVID rules meant that outside hospitality was the only thing that would be allowed. Turning to the noise issue, excuse me, throughout the process, the Council's own environmental team have supported the proposals, reinforced by the submission of the noise impact assessment, which includes robust mitigation measures, as acknowledged again in the committee report appraisal. Whilst acknowledging that some residents have reservations in relation to noise, the reality of the situation is that any complaints could jeopardise the operation of the overall enterprise, including the closure of the pub. For the benefit of the committee, the pub is not open at present. Presently, it provides takeaway hot food, home delivered food, due to my client's continued subsidy of the tenant while the planning position is progressed. Finally, to sum up, the development will provide an attractive low-key scheme in line with planning policy, which will be carefully controlled, bring a much needed investment, not only for the benefit of the pub, but the wider community, ensuring the safeguarding of an ACV in difficult economic circumstances. It's therefore recommended and requested that the Planning Committee recognises the merits of this proposal and follows the officer's recommendation and grants planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. If you'd like to return to your seat, please. It's all right, don't worry about that. I now ask the local member, Councillor Shires, if she'd like to speak. You have 5 minutes, Lucy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I shan't take 5 minutes. I'm sure members are happy about that. I shan't go over things that have been covered by both the Parish Council and the residents' concerns that have been listed, and obviously we've got quite a lot of information in the report. I just want to touch on the fact that this is recommended for approval with very strict conditions and very strict restrictions. So this isn't something that I feel is approved comfortably without a large set of rules that go with it. The biggest concern for local residents has always been the impact on the local environment with noise. This is a case that I've been dealing with for now almost 3 years, and residents have been consistent throughout. It's the impact to their quality of life that this will bring. The loss of green space is something that we as a council are championing and trying to hold dearly for North Norfolk. So it is sad to see that we will lose some green space through this development. And whilst parking spaces have been allowed for this development, for those of you that know the pub when it's busy, there are cars all over the village. The parking spaces aren't going to make much difference to the impact on the local area. I want to thank Officer Rubin for the work that he's done with both myself and local residents to fully understand the impact. There have been lots of emails, lots of conversations and lots of engagement. So I do feel that Officer Rubin has really listened to local residents. From the offset, residents have not opposed development of the pub. They've not opposed any work that would be needed to secure the longevity of the pub. In fact, from the very beginning, they were very, very supportive, but just wish for lesser units. That was the only stipulation, was lesser units. So I would wish to propose that further investigation is done to look at potentially extending the building of the pub so that all accommodation would be within the walls of the pub. So it wouldn't be out in the green space. And I would also like a further investigation to be done on reducing the units to 4 or 5 rather than the number that it stands at today. And having consulted with local residents, that's something that local residents are also comfortable with. I don't really have anything else to add that hasn't already been said.
Thank you, Lucy. Did you put these reservations on your part to Officer Rubin before today?
Yes, Officer Rubin's fully aware, bless him, for his patience and dealing with my my communication.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully appreciate the local concerns and the impacts of this development as outlined by our officer and of course by the ward member. In terms of the planning process, what you have in front of you is a proposal for lodges today, and the potential of returning under a deferral to the applicant regarding a reduction in the number of lodges may be something that could be encompassed within the same body of this application. I'm sure Colin will advise members before you go into debate as to any previous discussion, but clearly we've gone from 9 to 7. So there's an appreciation from the applicant that the number of lodges is impactful and that they are obviously working to a business plan. It may be that they're not able to revise any further. Regards extending the pub, that will be a different form of application. So if you are content that an extension to the pub would be an alternative, then I would recommend, Chairman, that a decision is made on this application as it stands today, and that then the discussions could be taken forward if the owner, that the ACV are minded to engage with the council regarding an extension to the building. I regret, unfortunately, Chairman, we'll be looking at a different form of planning application. So there will be a technical issue in trying to negotiate a deferral on that basis. So my advice would be determine the application as it stands, if that's members' favoured position. Colin, do you have any updates on negotiations on numbers of lodges?
It's probably worth bearing in mind that obviously the original application proposed 9. This has reduced to 7. What I would say is that was quite difficult, and I think the agent and applicant, you know, they probably pushed it as far as they felt comfortable doing. You know, I think we did push, but what's in front of us is what's in front of us, which is 7, and on the basis of that, we are comfortable with the recommendation. In terms of whether they'd be willing to push that any further, well, the agent is here today. I don't know if that's a question that could be asked directly of them, but there were discussions prior to the application. That's how we've arrived at 7 in front of us today.
As this is contentious, Mr. Dixon, do you wish to answer to the plea that it comes down from 7? What was the reason for sticking at 7? Was this economic viability? You can do, yes. Save you coming all the way up here again. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we're going to go with the application as it stands. Have I got anybody from the floor who wishes to speak on this one? Councillor Heinrich?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I might be one of the few in the room who have known the village and the pub for about 60 years now, plus probably. We have family links in the area. Historically, this piece of land was a small holding attached to the pub. The pub, even then, depended on second income for viability. I doubt if much has changed since. Therefore, if we look at it now, to have an additional income stream is likely to be the only way a pub of that size can survive. The design we have in front of us, it's not ideal, but it is what it is, and it has made good use of the space. We have a whole list of conditions we are imposing, which should ensure that issues such as noise are not a major problem. The applicant has very wisely removed the jacuzzis and other things which were a potential source of problems. I would like assurance that the lighting is so arranged that it does not impact on any dark skies requirements. I'm not quite sure that's there at the moment. But ultimately, we have a position where we're providing additional holiday accommodation, which has to be good for the economic development of our area. We are heavily dependent on tourism, perhaps too heavily dependent. But I cannot see that the pub itself remains viable without this additional income stream, and therefore I'm supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you. No, I'm proposing, Chair, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say, first of all, I don't really know the area. It's not part of the region that I live in, so I can only go on the information I've got in front of me. I just have a couple of questions, really, which may or may not be relevant and someone could answer. I read through the papers, and they're looking that when these units are being used, they want to be able to use the pub to provide the amenities and the services for the people that are staying there to use it, maybe for food, restaurant or whatever. I understand the current condition of the pub is that it can't be used. So why not do the pub first to make it presentable so it's ready for the people when they move in? That's my one question. The other thing is that what happens if the public house fails and you're left with these 7 units and the public house doesn't work, it can't be changed and it's not being used? Is there a business plan that the people have, or is their grand plan to knock the pub down as well, de-license it, and then put more units up? Thank you.
Thank you. Colin, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, in terms of in future, whether the pub failed or not, I mean, I think we would have to cross that bridge as and when it occurs. I'm not sure that's directly relevant to the application at the moment, but obviously the units as we're approving would the intention is that they would go hand in hand with the pub. So if the pub did close, then I assume that at that point the pub would have to be sold on together with the units to a new owner. That would be my understanding, but I'm not aware that there's necessarily a business plan to prepare for that eventuality. Again, the agent may know otherwise, but not that I'm aware of at this stage.
In addition to the comments from Officer Rubin, the position is where the condition recommended at the bottom of page 25 talks about the accommodation being formally tied to the public house, not to be sold off separately. The accommodation itself is clearly key to the diversification of the offer of the asset of community value and is part and parcel of an investment strategy. I don't believe it's appropriate or reasonable in terms of conditional control to tell the pub when they should make that investment. That is a business operation that the pub should rightly control the asset of community value. Members, if you are concerned that the tourism use may continue trading should the pub close, you may require an alternative condition to be added to this permission. If the pub were to close, then you could require a condition that would require the tourism accommodation to close. Its reason for being is essentially to provide diversification and additional value to the public house. It may be that that condition could be challenged, but in essence, your reason for allowing this permission is to enable that diversification of the business. So that may be something that could be considered reasonable. You may consider adding to that a requirement for these accommodation pods to be removed after a certain period of time. However, obviously, members, that decision is in your gift today, and it's an additional restriction. Generally, as planning officers, we recommend normally that as few conditions are as applied as possible, but I do understand your concerns, and conditions may be enforceable and reasonable on the basis that I suggest.
Thank you, Philip. We'll come back to that extra condition when I've heard the other members speaking who wish to speak. Councillor Pearce, you wish to speak next?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I note with grave concern this application. I think the member who brought it towards committee is obviously very troubled. If I look at the aerial photograph on the second page, the site location plan aerial, and I'm going to see in horror, and it is a horror, some tin shacks painted grey right in the middle of that area, and every building is either brick, flint or tiled roof. I don't call that looking after, first of all, our heritage, which is one of our core strategies. Secondly, I give brave credence and a lot of credence to the fact develop the pub first, because at the end of the day, if the pub was developed to provide additional commercial income, that would be more in line with the neighbourhood, and which would obviously suit, I believe, all parties all round, possible exception of the applicant. So I look at that one, and I look at the fact that also this may also impugn the human rights of the people there locally to enjoy their possessions in a calm and respectful manner without undue interruption and nuisance. I don't think this one has been thought through carefully enough, and that is not get out or an admission of undue attention by the officers or people concerned. It does concern me, and upon looking upon it, it is not a straightforward application judged by the number of conditions that are put to it. And here we are having to make the possibility of adding another decision before we can accept and comply with the approved stance of approval. I don't like it, and I'm a businessman. I understand the need to survive, I understand the need to trade. In this area, if I look at it, you're going to butcher this area. Butcher's Arms is the right name for it. Sorry if it seems a bit cryptic, but I'm going to vote against it. Thank you.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning. Pubs in rural villages are very, very important in my view. I have some very good ones in mine, and I'm very fond of them all. I hear you, it's community value. Is it actually registered as a community asset? Can somebody help me with that?
Colin, I believe it is. Is that right?
It is, yes, yeah. The community asset is the pub and the area of land on which the units would go. So it's the entire entity is an asset of community value.
Lovely, thank you, Colin, because that means that it would be very, very difficult to close this pub because it is of community asset. So we have to do the best that we possibly can to keep it and to ensure that it is a viable business. And therefore, I am more than happy to second the recommendation to approve according to the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
What happened there? Was
I'll
that
just
you, Andy?
coughed.
Well, you
Sorry.
have clearing your throat. If you wish to speak, you'll have to get in line because there are 3 more before you.
Oh, in line, sorry.
That's okay. Gerard, I think you're next.
Thank you. That was quite bizarre.
I'm not going to say a word.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've looked through this in a lot of detail, and quite frankly, I believe that the applicant has, gone from 9 to 7, put acoustic fencing in. The lighting issue can be easily rectified by just having everything at low level, down lighting. And with regards to the heat source pumps, well, I'm afraid that's the way the future's going these days, because gas boilers, as we all know, you will not have any more. Heat source pumps are the way to go. So I'm afraid you're going to have to put up with the noise. And I would imagine if it's a pub anyway, there's a certain amount of noise from the equipment they use anyway. And looking at the distance of the houses away from these proposed dwellings, to me, it seems quite a long way off. So I don't really see that there's much of a problem with this. And quite frankly, I think the developers have, addressed all these issues and brought forward solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. Andrew Brown, Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think there are just two issues that concern me slightly. The first one is how we tie in this condition that the unit should not be sold separately from the pub. As we know, planning conditions are, as time goes on, open to challenge and application to relax them or vary them. So I would like to see it in a planning agreement rather than as a condition, if that's possible. I don't know if the Assistant Director for Planning or the Principal Lawyer can assist me on that. The second thing that concerns me is the loss of green space, which is obviously a concern to people in the village, and that isn't helped by the fact that we're on 7 units when perhaps people would prefer a lesser number, say 5 units, but if that's not viable, then we're stuck with that. But I just want to press on what sort of biodiversity mitigation or biodiversity enhancement measures we're considering, just so that people do know here today from this meeting what is proposed. And I do have some sympathy with Councillor Pearce's comments. I think what we're creating here is something of a mini motel. And I know that the site will be visually constrained by additional perimeter screening. It's behind the pub, not immediately visible from the nearest roadway going through the village. But you do look at this, you see it's a rural village, you look at the materials, and I've said this before, that the spread of zinc sheeting for roofing does concern me. It's not vernacular. If East Ruston had a neighbourhood plan, no doubt they would be saying, we don't want that. So I think more effort could be made by the applicant to use materials which are more vernacular to the area. And I'm sure that local people in the village would appreciate that. But I'm all in favour of anything that revives a pub. We all know that pubs are the lifeblood of most of our villages. So I do hope the analysis by the Economic Growth Unit is correct, and that this will help sustain the Butcher's Arms moving forward for the benefit of the village itself and for the surroundings.
Andrew, what was the query you asked way back? I've lost it in the midst of time.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, it's how we make the condition as sustainable as we possibly can.
Okay.
So that the units are not separated, are not sold separately to the pub further down the line. I just want absolute clarity on it, and I think it would benefit members here today if we had that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Government guidance says that where a restriction can be imposed by either planning condition or agreement, the preference is that it is imposed by condition. Now, as you rightly point out, a condition can be applied to be varied in the future, but securing the restriction by way of a legal agreement also can be varied. So you wouldn't get any greater protection going by the Section 106 route rather than planning condition. Government guidance is that conditions are to be preferred, because then you've got the right of appeal through to the planning inspectorate. And I'd just like to address the committee in relation to the asset of community value and what that means. It's a separate regime from planning. It doesn't prohibit development. What it means is that in the event of a proposal to sell the unit, the community will have a right to bid to purchase it in the future. That also does not guarantee that they'll be sold to them, but they have a right to prepare a bid to purchase the asset of community value and then run it as such. Thank you.
Colin, you
The
want
Chair,
to?
Colin wants to.
Yeah, Colin, you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Andrew just raised a point about biodiversity as well, which I thought I'd just cover. We would condition a landscaping scheme. Part of the proposal would include additional tree planting around the boundary of the site. Within the site, there's proposed to be additional planting, wildflower planting. In addition to that, there is a proposal to install back boxes on suitable trees along the western site boundary as well.
Yes, thank you, Colin. If you look, members, on the recommendation, the conditions, condition 9, 10 and 11, I think cover Councillor Brown's queries. You okay with that, Andrew?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. I think the fact it requires an acoustic fence is rather sad, given that it is a rural area, and all these mitigations that are required. I'm with Councillor Pearce that it does sound as if it's not really very suitable. And the ACV, in my experience, are very difficult to get, and it usually means that the community is very, very proud and attached to what it's protecting. And it'd be interesting to unpick how much of that is the pub and how much of that is the bowling green, because you could use that as an argument either way, I think, in this place. But I would like, from my experience, to say jolly difficult to get an ACV. And if you've got one, you know, you treasure it, so you can do with that what you will. But to me, I've got a slight question about, Councillor Rest referred to it, the fact that the pub isn't providing any sustenance at the moment. What are these people in these little cabins going to do? They're going to drive in and out all day, going and get cups of coffee and sandwiches. And I think the net zero, which we were encouraged yesterday at our action session to pay heed to, is the net zero, even though it's got all sorts of insulation and solar panels and etc. I think these people are going to be in and out of these little cabins because you're not going to want to spend much time in them. So they're actually going to be having quite a big impact on carbon emissions. So I'm a little bit, I think this is very finely balanced, this, but I'm feeling that the village probably won't be enhanced by them. Thank you.
I think Colin, the idea is that the pub will then restart relatively soon, providing meals, etc.
And the intention is for the units to fund refurbishment of the pub. In terms of meals, the units themselves would have very limited facilities. In the submission, it talks about breakfast facilities. So it would probably amount to a kettle and a toaster, something along that ilk, but there wouldn't be any capability in the units to be able to create their own meals. So they would be heavily reliant on meals from the pub. That's my understanding.
Okay, Victoria. Andy, we're to you now.
I've been listening very carefully to everybody, and I have a very well balanced pieces of notes here that I've made some bullet points. I will tend to disagree with some of the things Councillor Pearce has said. I'm sorry, Nigel, I'm sorry. This seems to be very finely balanced, and I've made some points here that the applicant has already exhausted in applying to. I think this whole application has been addressed, and the issues raised have been addressed and are thus the use of solar panels and also potential electrical charging points. I've got bulleted here. The case of the drainage has been addressed, which is a very important point. The noise and light issues have been addressed with panels, I believe. Is that correct, Colin? Is that panels and trees? Panels and trees are going to be planted there. The light, which I'm a photographer, so I'm very passionate about light, has been also addressed. And the business will do its utmost to uphold all these requirements, because at the end of the day, they want to be successful, you know. And can I go back to Lucy? Lucy, you said at the beginning, I've made a bullet point here, the residents had no opposed at the beginning? No one opposed it really at the beginning? Is that what you said?
No, the residents have never opposed that the pub needs to be developed.
Right.
The opposition came with the proposal of the development.
Right.
If that's any clearer.
That is.
The size of the development is the main
Right,
concern.
which is the point I'm coming to next, which I've jotted down here on this piece of paper. It's already been reduced, Colin, from 9 to 7. So that's already been addressed as well. And therefore I conclude in my mind that I am going to support the officer's recommendation for the reasons I made today.
Thank you, Andy.
Is that clear?
I think that's extremely clear. Thank you.
Sorry?
Colin, oh, sorry, yes. You're coming in now.
Sorry, just to cover the point about lighting has been raised a few times, but we would add a condition which would require the prior approval of any external lighting on the units. Certainly if external lighting was proposed, we would expect it to follow the guidelines of it being low energy, downward facing, and so forth. So we would look at that very closely if lighting is proposed at a future stage.
Thank you. That is one of the recommendations, the conditions, condition 15. And now to Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to admit I'm conflicted on this one with my economic growth hat on, even though we support pubs developing. I have the concerns I have is that we have dealt with many pubs through COVID and helped them survive by extending temporary facilities, outside marquees, tents, etc. My concern here is that the money that's going to be spent on building 7 units could easily be spent on improving the kitchen and food offering of the pub and some outside temporary accommodation. And that would then not impact on the village where when the pub closed, people would go. I mean, I am concerned you might have a stag party renting the units and they're in the pub till the pub closes, they go back to the units. I doubt whether they're going to be that quiet. And also the number of conditions we're putting on it, I find hard to know how we would enforce them. So even though I absolutely support local pubs in villages, and the ones that we have supported through COVID have prospered, have been the ones that have extended their food offering and outside but temporary accommodation within the hours of licensing. So sadly, I will vote against this one.
Thank you. Now, Andy, you can have a very quick.
Said it's just a small addition to what I said, and it's going to be very quick. Of all I said, I would like to add that the restrictions be followed profusely by the client.
Okay.
Yeah, is that all right?
I think yes.
Yeah. What do you mean?
I'd just like to say something here. I have a pub restaurant near me called the Wayford Bridge, which was starting to fail quite badly over the last few years. And they applied and received planning permission they are within the Broads Authority district, to build similar lodges, cabins as are proposed here. I know a couple who've stayed there a couple of times and find them extremely useful. They then feed in the pub, they have their meals in the pub, so the pub has suddenly become overwhelmed with the use. I'm not saying that this will happen in this state, in this particular case, because the Wayford Bridge is on a major thoroughfare, so it's a throughway. But and they are not over subscribed with stag parties and such like. It's mostly couples who come in and they're touring the area. I'm just putting that in because it is an example of something very similar which has been successful. Doesn't mean this one will be, but throwing that into the melee. So now we're going to go to, everybody finished speaking here? We'll go to the vote. The vote is for approval. The recommendation is for approval with the conditions as attached, 15 conditions. And we have the proposer is Councillor Heinrich, seconded by Councillor Fitch-Tillett. We'll go to the vote if you'd like to say for, against or abstain when your name is called out.
Thank you. Councillor Adams. Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
For.
Councillor Grove-Jones.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday.
Against.
Councillor Kershaw.
Against.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Varley.
For.
And Councillor Yassini.
For.
So that is 8 for and 6 against.
Right, we're now passing on to the second application. This is Beeston Regis and the Runtons, the Dormy House Hotel, PF/21/2593. And again, over to Colin to present.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is item 9 on the agenda, application 212593. The application, which is retrospective, proposes the removal of an existing outbuilding, raising paving and steps to the rear of the building, 2-storey side extension, new outbuildings to the side and rear, raised seating area with glass windscreen to the rear of the building with ramps and steps, a fire escape, pergola and glass windscreen to the front of the building, replacement of 2 roof windows by dormer windows, changes in bifold doors from the restaurant to an outdoor seating area, and a 2-metre screen fence to the eastern boundary, and that's the Dormy House Hotel in West Runton. The officer report is found on pages 27 and 30 to 34 of the report pack. The principle of development in respect of improving and extending the existing hotel as an existing business is acceptable in principle under policy EC3. Much of the development as proposed, although not all ideal, is considered to be acceptable in respect of design. It is noted that concerns have been raised in respect of highway visibility by a neighbouring resident in regards to a pergola constructed to the front of the site. However, the Highway Authority have not objected to the proposal, either in respect of visibility or in regards to parking provision within the site. An officer similarly conclude the development to be acceptable in this regard. It is further recognised that the proposal has not resulted in any objections from either the local parish council, landscape officer or the environmental protection officer. However, one aspect of the development is not considered to be acceptable by officers, and this is the proposed flat roofed grey cladded 2-storey side extension to the building. Proposals to improve and extend the building were approved in 2019, but that application proposed a two-storey hipped roof extension of materials to tie in with the existing building. What is now in existence is an extension which, as a result of the dark grey cladded finish and flat roof which protrudes above the existing eaves line of the building, results in an unacceptably incongruous appearance, which is in direct conflict with the appearance of the host building, unnecessarily drawing the eye to passers-by and therefore visually detrimental within the street scene. It is noted that it is set back from the front of the building, but this is not enough in officers' views to compensate for its unacceptable appearance. It is acutely recognised that there are economic benefits to what has been proposed on the whole in respect to supporting an existing established business, and noting that the rest of the proposals are acceptable. It is also understood that the previous approval was not pursued owing to the onset of COVID and resultant delays, difficulty securing contractors and financial difficulties, including the cost of the build. However, this is not considered enough in this instance to outweigh the significant visual design concerns of the proposed two-storey side extension, which is considered could have been constructed with a more sympathetic visual appearance, and noting that the rest of the development has been constructed with no apparent difficulty. So overall, to conclude, the officer recommendation is one of refusal for the reasons stated on pages 33 and 34 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I think it's really important, members, you have clarity on this. Clearly, we had issues with earlier representations that you saw in writing. In this instance, Mr. Brundle made every reasonable effort to send an email to the District Council. Unfortunately, the email was never received, but we appreciate through the Chairman's discretion that Mr. Brundle did everything within his power to try to make that registration in time. So his position is slightly different to those who were unable to register in time earlier on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, we have 3 minutes, and as I said, the famous timer will go off when.
I know, I've cut it drastically, trust me.
Okay.
Not a very good public speaker.
Start when you wish.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me the time. My name is Steve Brundle. I'm the proprietor of the Dormy House Hotel, West Runton. I purchased the rather neglected hotel in April 2013 with 5 employees and applied for planning consent in October 2019 and was granted in January 2020 with a budget of just over £400,000. On the 23rd of March, 32 staff were furloughed when the pandemic struck. Now, I know finance is not really to be considered in decisions of planning, but COVID has given us a very special reason to be considerate. We've all got stories to tell, but even our one little company has not only lost over 300,000 trading loss during this period, but members of staff, 1 committed suicide, several severe stress-related staff issues required counselling, and we had to seek urgent mainstream loan from a high street bank secured by the property, and this requires planning consent by the end of this month as funds are running out. We opened the hotel, we had to return over 20,000, when the pandemic struck, we had to return over £20,000 worth of deposits as just prior to Mother's Day. We opened the hotel in accordance to government guidelines on the 4th of July. Trading was slow, but people were nervous to eat and come out. And all with the government's assistance, all the eat out to help out, the introduction of Rule 6 and 10 PM curfews just exasperated the situation with turnover around a quarter of pre-COVID. Following easier lockdown rules in August 2020, contractors started work the last week of October. However, one of our first problems occurred when the foundations dug for the side extension where we intended to dig trench footings to 3-4 foot, but the ground condition was so poor, we had to engage additional structural engineer drawings, construct a pile raft foundation, which would cost a further £26,000 on top of our shrinking budgets. On the second lockdown of November the 5th, again, contractors withdrew for the work for a week or two before returning. However, the scarcity of building materials, shortage of manpower, and the daily uncertainty of will they turn up or not, exacerbated by COVID costs, furlough did not cover all of the costs. Money needed to be saved. The timber frame company suggested a flat roof rather than a hip pitch roof, saving over £6,500. At this time, we contacted the planning office several times and left messages. It was some 2 weeks before we received a reply and was told that the council were upgrading the council planning computer system, and that due to unforeseen circumstances combined with staff that were quite rightly working from home, it was nigh on impossible to speak or get advice, decision from a planning officer. With a large hole now in our east wall, leaving the whole east side exposed, the rim beam now nearing completion, and the up to plate level on the extension, we took the decision to go with the flat roof.
Thank you. I now go to the local member, Councillor Butakova.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a very difficult one. On the one hand, I would like to support the pub. On the other, I have to be equitable across the whole district. So I've called this application into committee as I believe it to be the best decision-making body for this application, and after consultation and discussion with the planning officer. Whilst on the face of it, this application might seem to be relatively straightforward, there are a number of points that I would like to bring to the committee's attention for the deliberations, please. A number of them concern our showing equitable management of applications across the district. Point 1. Members who also serve on the Planning Policy and Built Heritage Working Party will already be very well aware of my concerns protecting areas of our undeveloped coast. I'm concerned here that not enough consideration has been given to policy EN3, the undeveloped coast, and I would like to first draw your attention to this. Para 3.3.9 on page 70 of the Norfolk Core Strategy states, the whole of the coast has a special undeveloped character and appeal, which is critical to North Norfolk's distinctiveness and tourism economy. Non-essential development in a coastal area can have cumulative effects on landscape, biodiversity and recreation. Whilst Para 3.3.10, the undeveloped coast designation is designed to minimise the wider impact of general development, additional transport and light pollution on the distinctive coastal area. Whilst on the one hand, I am delighted to see local businesses thriving and growing, it cannot be to the detriment of the wider area. As can be seen from the report, this business has applied for many changes in recent years, almost all of which the local authority has worked hard with the applicant to support and approve. The frontage of this property has altered considerably from when it was sold some years ago, and it has gradually developed a much higher profile for itself on the coast road, to the detriment of the gentle coastal landscape of the area. Which brings me to point 3.3.12. In addition to the natural environment, the quality and local distinctiveness of the built environment in North Norfolk is an important asset for the area and has a significant impact on everyday life. The importance of new development complementing and relating to its surrounding while being safe and accessible for all is established in the core strategy, vision and aims. Point 2, car parking, despite assurances by the owners, does not appear to have increased. So at weekends and during the holiday season, the neighbouring verges are being parked on, again to the visual and I would argue environmental detriment of the area. There is also a considerable problem with speeding in this area and has been for a number of years. Cars are changing speed at this point and often don't. That I appreciate is not in the control of the applicant. I do not propose to repeat the comments of the planning office in her report, but I'm afraid I have to agree with her comments in the report that the extension as built is contrary to policy EN4 of North Norfolk's core strategy and section 12 of the NPPF and the design principles set out in the North Norfolk Design Guide. I have read the comments from our economic development team, and whilst I am hugely sympathetic with our tourism businesses and the impact it has had on them, we cannot ignore that others are working within the guidelines, and why is one business any different to another when applying the rules? Finance, I'm sad to say, and I, in this case, understand, would like to be a valid planning consideration, but it is not. We cannot allow our policies to be ignored. If we do, why do we have them? I would like to see if a middle way could be found that ensures remedial work is undertaken in respect of this application. As we have read in the report, there is much in this retrospective application that is compliant. Can we not ask the applicant to think again about making the required changes to the application compliant? However, if they're not able to work with us, then I believe the committee should seriously consider supporting the officer in their recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butikova. I now go to the floor. Anybody wish to speak on this? Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I actually take Councillor Butikova's comments to heart, and it's sad that it's part retrospective. If our planning department were unavailable, that's something we need to look at. Having it, I know we judge everything by its merit, but having just had an application for a pub where we've allowed buildings to be built in an area, and I was suggesting that you offer more catering and space to eat. This development to me fits in quite well. I'm not happy with the two-storey development. I would like to try and reach an agreement where that part of the application is resolved and the rest of it is accepted. It seems to me that's the planning department's main opposition, and I am very sympathetic to the financial situations of businesses. You know, we've worked through 2 years of this with businesses and grants, and I know the strain that the hospitality sector has gone through. So if we can reach an agreement and with the two-storey situation, I think that would be for the benefit of the council and the applicant. Thank you.
And what are you suggesting then?
That we try and reach an agreement on the two-storey section of the application, whether that with planning to whether it's a hip roof or it has to come down,
Okay.
but not to with the rest of the application to stand.
Officer
We're
Rowson.
going to have to defer. It's not going to happen today, is it?
Chairman, thank you. I understand members' concerns on this matter. The application in front of you offers a total form of development today. That development is the application that you must determine as it is presented on this agenda. You can approve the application, refuse it, or defer it. If the application was refused today, then the council will consider enforcement action against the element of the development that we would not otherwise grant planning permission for. So in that circumstance, officers would liaise with the developer, the owner of the site. We can liaise with the ward member and keep the ward member and our portfolio holder up to speed with where the enforcement position would stand. As I hear the debate today and read the officer's report, the matter of enforcement would relate to the side extension that Officer Rubin has highlighted for you. That enforcement notice may not extend further to other works that have been carried out on site, which may otherwise be granted planning permission. The opportunity would be available for the applicant to submit a further application free of fee for those elements that we would otherwise grant permission for. He may then come back and may obtain planning permission in that way. If the application is approved today, clearly the application is home and hosed. There is no need for any further action. If the application is deferred today, then we enter into further discussion about whether or not the applicant is willing to make further amendments to the side extension. You've heard today, members, that that is a matter of significant viability for this business and raises concern for that business. I'm sure, Chairman, at your discretion, the applicant may address the committee today and may tell you that they may or may not remove that side extension as it stands. However, members, your official recommendation is clear. It is refusal of permission. We would consider proportionate enforcement action, and we would keep members up to date as to that enforcement action as to its requirements, and enforcement notices would only be served if the enforcement negotiations were entirely exhausted. So many of the issues that you're seeking to draw together today, members, would otherwise be dealt with via the enforcement process. Thank you very much, Chairman.
No, I now go to Councillor Holiday. I'm so sorry, I lost the little list here.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, to me, this picture tells the story really, and I'm with Councillor Butockafer in that we have to protect our coast. That's what North Norfolk is all about, and I think this proposal does not do that.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sorry that it's retrospective for whatever reason, and that clearly needs clarification so that we can be kept informed. I think Councillor Butikofer summed it up. It is against planning law and our core activities, EN4 and Section 12. I do think rejection of this application in compliance with what the officer has recommended is correct. However, having listened to Officer Elson's dutiful observation of the situation, because we reject it today, doesn't mean to say we're going to send the boys round and tear the place to pieces. I think it opens an avenue and a keyhole for the applicant to discuss the rectification, which would then make this application permissible and legal under various laws. So although the applicant might not agree with refusal, that is the way forward following process, that then we can enter into meaningful discussions and get this sorted out, but it's got to be refused today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have great sympathy with the local member on this. As you are very well aware, I'm particularly keen on preserving parts of our coast, particularly the openness of it. This particular establishment has grown like Topsy over the years. I think when it originally back to around about the 70s, 80s, it was a rather modest guest house. And the Dormy House Hotel was actually located in Sheringham. Now, having looked at this, it is ugly. It has to be stopped. So if it hasn't already been seconded, I am happy to second the refusal, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I don't think I've got a proposer. Did anybody who's spoken so far proposed it?
Well, I'd better propose it then, Madam Chairman, according to the officer's recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm quite happy to second the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. I have tremendous sympathy with the applicant, and I'm very grateful to Councillor Butikofer for giving such a succinct and detailed summary of the planning permission of the situation. I would just add the caveat that I do hope that our enforcement team can work proactively and constructively with the applicant. We do want to encourage our hospitality businesses to recover from the pandemic. It's extremely important. We know how important tourism is to our economy in North Norfolk. So that said, I do hope that the applicant can work proactively and take on board that although it's not unlawful to start development without seeking planning permission first, I think this is an example where it's an object lesson. Applicants should really, as early as possible, engage with our planning services so that they know exactly where they stand and what policies are applicable. That said, I reiterate, I would second the officer's recommendation to refuse.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Kushka.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just point out to the committee, it is in fact unlawful to carry out development without planning permission. That being said, enforcement is the means by which it's regularised. The criminal offence is failure to comply with the enforcement notice. So something is unlawful, but not necessarily a criminal offence, which invites the possibility, such as we have here, of an application for retrospective planning permission, which effectively regularises the situation to render it lawful, where otherwise it would be unlawful.
All right. Is that okay, Andrew?
Well, we do have a retrospective planning application system. I'm not sure whether I quite understand
Well, perhaps you can have a
the principle why maybe we need a discussion offline about
I think you need to discuss offline with Noel about how that works. Sorry? More training. We'll be doing more training than meetings soon. I think that's a good idea. We have Mr. Councillor Heinrich, you wish to say something?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Clearly, we need to consider the economic needs of the area and possibly of the applicant. However, given that much of this is non-contentious, I think that's, let me set that to one side. The issue is with this extension. There was permission granted for an extension. What has been built is nothing like that granted by that permission, and that therefore needs to be resolved. Officer Rowson has given us a route forward that could be done by enforcement and discussion with the applicant if we refuse this, and I would suggest that is probably our best way forward. I back the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Andy, are you vacillating there again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's, to me, this is still in the balance because permission was given originally, but I totally respect why it wasn't approved by the officers. But if it's refused today, please, can you underline for me that everything will be done to assist this applicant in moving forwards?
Well, I can certainly assure you of that, but Officer Rowson will, I'm sure, back me up with this one.
And with as quickly as possible.
Yeah, okay.
Quickly as possible to help this applicant. Is that?
I shall speak as quickly as possible, and we will also offer advice to the applicant as quickly as we can. Let me outline, if members were minded to refuse, those actions that are available to the applicant. That may help your considerations today. A refusal of permission opens the opportunity to appeal against the council's decision. So the applicant has the opportunity, if you're minded to refuse today, to appeal against the council's decision. That opens the possibility of a conjoined appeal with an enforcement notice. We would like to exhaust the negotiations as to remediation that can be undertaken on this building. Clearly, there is an approved form of development that this council feels is appropriate for this site. Unfortunately, the applicant has detailed to you today, they don't feel able to do that because of the viability issues concerned. We will take those issues away. We will discuss with the ward member the issues that they have concerns with. You heard other issues being raised today. We want to make sure that when we look at the enforcement process, we're gathering together all of the relevant issues when we make contact with the applicant. Chairman, I believe that the planning process is fair. It is reasonable. It operates on the basis of an appeal. It operates on the basis of an enforcement process that has to be proportionate. On that basis, I would say Officer Rubin's recommendation and presentation to you today embody the principles of the planning process, and members are enabled to make one of those three decisions that I've outlined to you. I think we can proceed, Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you, Andy.
One very, very quick.
Oh dear.
And
oh
I've,
dear.
I've jotted here and underlined here without further cost. Is that correct?
But I don't think that's for us to.
Oh, yes, but I just
That's not
underlined
within
it. I
our
thought,
purview.
yeah, yes, yes.
That's. Settle.
Is it? Okay.
If, can I just say, that if the recommendation is carried, then Mr. Brundle, the discussions with Officer Rowson, Officer Rubin and the planning department will go ahead, and for mitigation on your behalf, if it is so desired, I'm sure there's a way forward. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. We note your comments. Unfortunately, your financial situation is really not to be discussed here. I know it's hard, but we are here to look at planning. There's planning application here. So we have a proposer with Councillor Fitch-Tillett and a seconder with Councillor Brown to go with the officer's recommendation for refusal as stated on page 33 and 34. Sarah.
Sorry, I know it's not normal for me to be allowed to speak at this moment, Madam Chairman, so thank you. Could I just ask, is there any way this could be conditioned that this is done to help the applicant? We've seen on the last application how many conditions were put on an application.
Condition to what?
Condition for him to rectify the situation within the next 12 months.
Is that possible, Philip? I'm not sure how the enforcement.
Chairman, I believe that members are entitled to make a decision on the details in front of them today. I feel it would be the enforcement process that would be best used here. I've outlined for you today that if a decision is made on this application as it stands, then the applicant has a backstop. They can appeal against that. They also have a permission that they can implement. The enforcement process would talk about the reasonableness and the proportionality of taking actions with the applicant and negotiate an acceptable solution and give a timeline for that to happen. If the approved proposals were not then delivered, then an enforcement notice may be considered. However, Chairman, as I say, today is one that relates to the proposals that are in front of you. I think it would stretch the bounds of a planning condition in law if we ask for the applicant to take remedial action to then impose a proposal that is previously approved. There is a development that can be brought forward. The condition is not required to deliver that. So my view would be, Chairman, you need to make a decision on the proposals in front of you. We recognise the debate that has been had today, and our enforcement process would be expedient and proportionate in terms of those discussions with the business involved. I invite Noel for any further concept.
Thank you. So I endorse what Officer Wilson has said. They would, in my view, not be lawful for a condition to require works to be undertaken. That is the purpose of the enforcement process, not a planning application. Planning application is to permit development, not to require it. And imposing a condition that would require development would, in my view, be illegal and unlawful.
Thank you. So we now go to the vote. As we said, Angie's proposing and Andrew is seconding. Your names will be called out. Normal procedure, for, against and abstention. Thank you, Laura.
Councillor Adams. For. Councillor Brown. For. Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Grove-Jones. For. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. For. Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Varley.
For.
And Councillor Yasini.
For.
That is unanimous, 14-4.
Thank you. The recommendation is carried, and I would ask Mr. Brundle to have discussions with the planning department and the enforcement system. Thank you all very much.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Brundle. Two of you ladies. Oh, right. We're going to pass over to Philip now because he's going to give his normal discussion on the development management. Do you want to do the 106 first or at the end?
Let me present the performance report, Chairman, if that's okay. Members, on the papers today at agenda item 10, you've got the details of the development management performance for the month of February. You'll see in February that the performance for the majors team is detailed as a matter of some concern. You'll see within the body of the report that what we intend to do going forward into March is to enable members to be updated on those decisions that will be coming forward from the major developments team, the major projects team. That will take the form of an appendix which will detail on a red, amber, green basis negotiations that are ongoing relating to Section 106 agreements that have been agreed by the District Council at Development Committee, subject to the completion and issue of decision. The matter at hand, members, is one of making sure that you are briefed of the progress of those Section 106 agreements and that we are timely in the delivery of those agreements and the delivery of those decisions. I'm sure Noel may address you after I finish talking about Section 106 matters and where he considers the delays may lay, generally. I say generally. So you'll see, members, that our performance on major developments is 84% as against a national requirement of 60%. The performance itself is above the national average, but I think it is an area that we can improve upon with members' support and officers' engagement. Then, Chairman, turning towards the matter of non-major developments, you'll see that I've projected forward the amount of decisions that may be made in the quarter as a result of January and February's performance. You'll see, members, that I'm looking at a potential of 96% of all decisions being in time for non-major developments or with agreed extensions of time. That will move the council to a position of 80% as set against a national figure of 70%. Members, you'll note in the report I talk about the need to improve the number of decisions going through this process. You will also in the report see that we are getting rising numbers of decisions being made within the 8-week period, and you will see that the exception now, in rare exception, is where officers are not meeting the agreed extensions of time. So some positive notes to follow up through January and February. Looking at the influencing factors in section 4, you'll note, members, that I review the number of cases that are held as live items on the planning account. We've got 552 cases, and the breakdown of that in terms of non-major cases is an average of about 29 cases per officer. That's fallen from 35 last month. And on the majors team, we have a number of cases at 29 cases per officer. Chairman, please be aware that the majors team are working with the non-majors team, and that some of their cases are in fact non-major developments. Sorry for the fine grain, but it's important to understand that the non-majors team are actually working to help out other sectors of the service when I'm reporting to you. You'll also see, Chairman, that we've had new joiners this month and a promotion. We've got 2 new officers in the development management team, and we also have the promotion of Bruno De Fargo Costa, who's been promoted to a senior officer role in the majors team. Looking forward, you can see at 4.5 of the report that we're looking to reduce the reliance on extension of time requests. I give you some details of where we stand currently in the progress, and that we will be looking at any short-term capacity boost that we may require. We have enhanced performance management reports, which are now available for case officers and team leaders and our managers. And we are seeking to continue to improve on the matter of communication with members, agents, and the wider community. I think, Chairman, that is an area we will continue to strive to improve on, but I am seeing improvements generally. So on the basis of that note and my presentation to you today, Chairman, I ask that members note the content of this report, and I open any questions or comments that you may wish to raise.
Thank you, Philip. Any members wish to question this at all? Gerard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Officer Ralston for that. It's glad to see that you're still keeping the old figures up, which is brilliant. Could you give me some feedback on your customer service that you have? I can't see anything in the report, because it's pity Lucia wasn't still here, because she may have helped out, but could you give us any information on that, please?
Through you, Chairman, the purpose of this report is ostensibly to report back on matters of performance as detailed within our key performance indices and our national performance indices, which are detailed with you. We are looking at a planning improvement process with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I would welcome the members attending and speaking at that matter, where customer service will be part of those improvements that we're considering. It's not specifically part of this report. This report is really about the nuts and bolts of the numbers and the efforts that we're making to improve those numbers for performance.
All right, Gerard.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions for Philip on this report? Oops, sorry. Do you know, I should have my head on a swivel, shouldn't I, really?
You're not doing a bad job this morning already, Madam Chairman, so there you go. Just through you, Madam Chairman, it was mentioned in the last case about the computer system, etc. I take it through this that it's operating satisfactorily. I think a little bit of feedback from Officer Ralston on that would be appropriate, because without that computer system, we've had it.
Philip?
I can put members' concerns at rest. We are seeing more and more updates to the computer system. The system itself is managed and monitored by dedicated officers, both in the planning service and within the IT group. Sadly, Chairman, with any software, there is a reliance, and when the software lets the team down, there are issues that we need to pick up with the software provider. We have had some issues with poor advice relating to the use of servers from the software provider, which created some service difficulties. But those measures were picked up by the IT team and by the officers who managed the system very quickly, and those issues have been resolved.
Thank you. Is that okay, Nigel?
Yes, I think obviously we all know the importance of the computer system, and you know, we've got a improvement in performance, and if that's been maintained through and while the computer has been malfunctioning, in whatever terms, well done.
Thank you. I mean, I still put up my hand and say I like to talk to someone. And I like to talk to someone face to face in situations that are controversial. And I'll put the plea in for those of us who are over a certain age. And those of us who are below that certain age who are much more adept and used to using the technology that exists. But I have always been assured that there would not be any diminution in personal discussion with people coming to the council offices. I believe that's so, Philip, isn't it?
I'm not really here to speak about customer services. You need to talk to Mr. Kelly about that. He will come over and have a stern word with me if I'm not careful, Chairman. Mr. Kelly is very keen to promote wide access via the use of our web pages and trying to use those in the first instance. So the corporate position potentially on customer services is a little different to that you're stolen.
I'm just actually bringing it into the planning area because I do know that there are people who in my ward who are more comfortable with the thought that they can talk to someone within planning. And I do know that has been, because when Sarah was doing this, she was adamant that people could still make an appointment and come in and talk to someone from planning. Let's hope that still exists.
Noted, Chairman, I understand. And as I say, the first port of call is the web page. If people need to speak to someone beyond that, then of course they're able to.
Right. Thank you. Andrew.
Yes, very quickly, Madam Chairman, just for the benefit of members, this issue is on the overview and scrutiny quarterly performance management review. So we do monitor the introduction and performance and efficiency of the new system at overview and scrutiny. It might just allay one or two concerns that Councillor Pearce may have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We now pass on to the appeals section. Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep this brief and largely as read. The issues of hearings, just one point to note for you, members. The hearing relating to Arcady on page 41 of your agenda is a hearing which is now fixed to be heard at Cley Village Hall and will be heard on the 22nd and 23rd of June. So we have a date for the enforcement appeal hearing. That, members, will be dependent upon bringing forward the planning applications for Arcady that we currently have. I will be bringing those forward to you, Chairman, in March. We have 2 meetings in March, so that will be the 17th of March or the 31st. So you will have those reports in front of you and decisions will be made. If the applications are refused, then of course the enforcement process will need to proceed in June. Looking at the matter in Sheringham on the page 43 of your agenda, we have an update on that issue. This is application PO/20/1327, erection of single detached property at 5 Meadow Way, Sheringham. I can confirm, members, that that matter has in fact now been dismissed. We received that decision last week. And I would add that dismissal to the notes of decisions on pages 43 and 44. And Chairman, note that we have had all of the appeals dismissed, and that Sheringham appeal decision obviously sits with that group of decisions. Currently, our appeal record is exceptionally good, as reported to you in the planning performance statistics. And you can see, Chairman, that we stand significantly in advance of any national criteria. We have one major appeal determined against the council's decision over the last 2 years, and we stand at under 2% in terms of non-major decisions made against the council's decisions. So I can say, Chairman, that this committee and officers are making very resolute and strong decisions that are not being overturned by the planning inspectorate. I think that's a good point to conclude the report.
Yes, and I concur with that. I think that's excellent. As we said in our pre-application meeting, it's sad in a way because these people are having their desires and wishes and plans turned down, but they are against planning application, planning rules, and it's good that our officers make such sensible decisions and that they're upheld by the inspector. Right, thank you. So we go to item 12 on the agenda, exclusion of press and public, not private business. Anything at all, anybody? No. No, it's urgent exempt. No exempt matters. So I conclude this meeting at 11:16. Thank you very much.